Hello there and welcome everybody to another virtual space here on LinkedIn Live Friday afternoon. And those of you who have been following me this year, you might have seen that I am bringing on for the first time a guest who has already been on the show with me, and it is Kassy LaBorie. Absolutely. After our LinkedIn Live, I think it was this year, early in July, August, we had a LinkedIn Live about interactive online trainings, and I got a tremendous feedback, and me myself, I was super thankful for learning so much in a 45 minutes or 42 minutes knowledge bite here with Kassy that I decided we need to feature her again because her new book is coming out. And with that, I'm already super happy, and I'm opening up here the virtual doors for Kassy LaBorie Connecting early morning from the US. Hi there.
Hi, thank you for having me today.
Hey there, Kassy. Thanks so much. I know that we have a huge time zone difference, so it's fantastic that you are sort of an early bird there and connecting at 8:45 or 9 your time, right?
Yes, it's not too early. It's wonderful. Thank you.
That is fantastic. Thanks so much. So I already mentioned you have been with us here on the LinkedIn Live show. I think it was July or August, and we had a tremendous discussion about interactive live trainings and how to engage the audience. And I'm super happy because today we are slightly switching to the production part.
Mhm. So important. And, I very much believe that we trainers and presenters are having trouble focusing on our participants and our presentations because, well, we're trying to figure out how to launch the poll or close the poll and make sure that people can see it. All the technical and logistical things that are required to do even something like what we're doing today, they take our focus away from what our messaging may be.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I think when we had the conversation early on about interactive online training, we also spoke about how important a producer is during an event. And with that, I think I'd love to start with the first question, Kassy. What is your experience as a producer? Because I know you have 2 decades of experience as a virtual live facilitator, correct? And you also cooperate with other facilitators and produce. So what is your take on that? What is your experience here?
Well, I do, you're right. I primarily work as a trainer and as a presenter, and that's also what my business does, is teaches people how to be trainers and presenters in this environment. And so long ago, when we roll it back to when I first began doing this type of work, I was a Microsoft trainer, and then I went to work for WebEx, and I was teaching people how to use WebEx when they purchased it. And what happened at that point is I had an IT team around me that was 100% focused on making WebEx work. And so though they weren't official producers, they were available for me on instant message so that when I was teaching in front of a live audience, I could get to them pretty quickly and they would come in and assist me with any problems so I could proceed with the training. So that was the first part of it for me. Fast forward 6 years, I go to work for another organization where I'm teaching people how to be trainers. And we were all trainers. And what we did is we helped each other. And so it was a way for us to onboard new virtual trainers. I'll partner with, John, he's the new trainer coming in. I'll partner with him. He'll produce for me, leading on the technical aspects of what we're doing. And then we'll slowly shift over, giving him training components to do until I could completely hand it over to him. And so then we had, the role of the producer, but they were actually trainers in training at that point, but they were still manning, if you will, leading on the technology. And so then what happened when we were all trained and we were all, we didn't have people that we were onboarding anymore, we found that we still wanted to be in teams of 2. And so officially the role of the producer was born, and we began to train people to do that who weren't necessarily in the role of becoming a trainer. And then one last example of this is that I then move on to work for Dale Carnegie. And in 2011, we launched Dale Carnegie Digital, global Dale Carnegie learning experience that we took into the online environment, which was already happening in person. And what happened there is you have trainers who know how to do Dale Carnegie training, and they do that for years and years. And we needed to immediately just implement the role of the producer to help them be successful with the technology. And so I've always been in this position of helping people figure out how to train online, but then there's been this, well, we need help. And so the role of the producer was born over, the 2 decades of my career, actually. And it plays out in different ways. And that's actually one of the things that I outline in my book, the different ways that a person or a group of people can manage the production tasks that are necessary for us to be successful in this environment.
That is fantastic. So for all of you out there who are into virtual events, virtual training, virtual facilitation, whatever you call it, I definitely would recommend you to go to Kassy's webpage, and we're going to post the link right after here in the chat window as well, because Kassy also has the virtual training hero tips, right?
Yes. I love that. The virtual training hero was born last year, although she is all of us. But I'm going to be, I've been over the past year posting, a tip or two each week around what you can do to be successful here, that with the intention of you being able to immediately apply the tip. And what I'm doing actually right now, one of my projects for the new year, is to compile all of those tips into one book. And so in 2021, I do plan to have the Virtual Training Hero as an ebook that will be downloadable for everybody.
Exactly, that's what you told me. That is fantastic.
Thank you.
So let's go there to your webpage, kassyconsulting.com. If you click on the blog, you find the virtual training hero tips. And it's fantastic because you see that Kassy and me, we don't have only the connection that we both love virtual facilitation, but it's also virtual space hero and virtual training hero tips. So we have sort of also kind of our wording aligned, right?
We were meant to know one another. That's great.
Absolutely. And wait, Kassy, should we disclose we have something else very interesting in common?
I think we should. You do it.
That is, we are or were both passionate dancers, right?
Yes. I was watching your recent video where you were doing a leadership presentation, it looks like, or conference, and then you were doing examples through dance, and you were doing West Coast swing. And I have to admit, when I was watching your video, I stood up and was like, oh, I'm going to pretend like I'm dancing with her, because I don't have formal training. I love to do it, and I watch everyone, and I danced. I used to live in San Francisco, and I spent the entire decade of my 20s swing dancing every night.
I am really curious what we're going to figure out until next year, what else we have in common. I already know something else, but we're not going to disclose that now. So anyways, KassyConsulting.com. Also, in the invitation for this LinkedIn Live, Kassy is tagged, so connect with her, because Kassy is also training online virtual trainers. So definitely that is very an interesting offer that is out there. Let me start with one of the first questions that I'd love to ask you, and I also got several ones beforehand before we started. So we were discussing, what do we need to prepare when we think about running a virtual event or virtual workshop that is smoothly? So how do we prepare technology and content before to run everything smoothly? What would you say are like a few cornerstones that you describe in your book? And for more details, we of course go to your book then.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. I think that the first thing for me is making sure that I know what type of technology we're going to be going live with, because there's a lot of technology out there today. We keep seeing new ones pop up, and even the ones that exist are getting new features. And so I think a cornerstone is to understand everything about the technology that you are about to use, how it works. And in my book, I try to help people understand how to approach that by in my mind, it has always been that there are two types of technologies that we'll work with. So for example, Zoom is quite popular right now as a web conferencing and training tool. And Zoom is what I like to call a revealer type platform, where you create the Zoom session, but you cannot put content into it. You must reveal your training content and plan once you click start. And so it's important that as I'm designing and preparing my program, that all my materials are available for me to click on and open and access once I start my session.
Mm-hmm.
The other type is what I like to call the builder type. And this classic example and most popular example is probably Adobe Connect. And so with Adobe Connect, I can go create a link right now, and my class could be in a month. And I could preload all of the activities and materials and content into that location. And I could even turn it into a template and be able to reuse that. And it will stay there. There are classes that I delivered at Dale Carnegie 6 years ago that I could actually, if the link was still live, I could go in there and click on it and the content will still be there. And so knowing the difference between those two, I can build that environment ahead of time, which admittedly a lot of people who work in learning and development probably prefer. Let's be honest, we're planners, aren't we? But there are pros and cons to every technology, but the key thing is to know the difference, because building out a platform and sending people to a link that's already preloaded is a different technical and development experience than what is required of you if you're using a program that operates more like Zoom, because I cannot show that content or preload any of it. I have to reveal it once we go live. So that's the first thing that I start with. What kind of platform am I working with, and exactly how does it work? What options do I have? Because that informs what I need to do with the content from the design side, and it also informs what I need to make sure the trainers and those who will be producing know how to manage.
You know what? And I think I just heard that 3 days ago when I was in your Ask Us Anything session together with your colleague, Nanette. And I found it so interesting because I didn't know that differentiation. I primarily work now with WebEx meeting, usually over the Zoom. I have been working in the past with Adobe Connect because we had a university license. Many universities in Austria and the German-speaking world had Adobe. But Adobe, I think they lost so many people because the design was so bad until 3 weeks ago
I know
or
they
1
just
month
changed
ago.
it. I know we all love
Yeah, yeah,
Adobe,
yeah.
but it's harder to learn. But it's harder to learn because it's more that it can do. And yeah,
Yeah.
so that's such a good point that you brought up. Like Adobe wasn't really keeping up with the changes in the interface that we all expect. And then they did. Now they have this new version and it's pretty incredible. So things are always
Absolutely.
changing. And WebEx is an interesting one, Barbara. Did you notice I didn't mention WebEx, even though that's where I began my whole career?
Started, yeah.
WebEx for me primarily falls into the world of a revealer, but it is not entirely a revealer because you can do some things ahead of time. But for the most part, WebEx acts more like a revealer, where once you click start, then you're going to upload your slides and show people things. They can't get there until you open it, right? So WebEx is an interesting one, though, because you can upload some things once you have opened it. Yeah.
I also think that it's really, I need to go back at some point when I have the time to Adobe, because I know that there was a lot of discussion online how different the platform looks now. And I didn't have a chance yet to check it out, but I do know that the features that Adobe had, everybody who was into 100% virtual facilitation was super happy with Adobe, because you can build the whole interface the way you need it. I assume they still have that feature, and you can build so much there, which of course creates a totally different environment for whatever you want to do. And that's nice, but it's also, as you're saying, more complicated at the
It's more
beginning.
complicated. It's not as simple, open my session and do my thing. It is that you need to focus on what can I do. I always say it's let's be honest, it's Adobe. They're known for beautiful product that can do a lot. And so it's the difference between, photo editor that's free on your computer where all I do is just crop it and, change it and Photoshop, which I can make beautiful things with if only I knew how.
Absolutely, absolutely. Good example, good example. Yeah. And we are super happy. Thank you so much for your comments. Also, we are happy sharing more examples of good builders Thanks a lot, Ahmed. Thank you very much. And let us know your questions and your comments in the chat function. I know I see people out there. We are streaming to 3 platforms. Facebook, our primary platform is LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube as well. So just let us know your questions. We're happy to answer them. So if we think about, okay, we said we need to know well and understand well what platforms we're talking about. What else in terms of content would you prepare, or would be sort of some tips to prepare beforehand to run a smooth virtual session?
Well, it all goes back to, what can the technology do? So it's really important for instructional designers to understand what options we have, and that's going to inform how much time it's going to take for the trainers to deliver it. And so what I like to do, and we talked about this earlier in the week, as you mentioned, the PowerPoint slides for me become more like a canvas and a map. So they're not necessarily, I don't ever approach it like this is the content that I must tell people. I approach it more like I have a main PowerPoint deck that's going to guide us through the learning process in each moment, which will tie into a bigger learning journey if we've got a bigger program going on. So my slides guide us through welcoming you. So the first slide is not the title of the program with the objectives. The first slide is welcome, how are you? What drew you to us today? It's an active space that we're going to use as a visual of what we're doing in each moment. And it's also going to give us a space to work from. So I'm very fond of programs that let me annotate on top of slides that I'm sharing, so that I don't have to bring in separate whiteboards, because I do things like my PowerPoint slides too will have even a place for, as I just mentioned, welcoming you and calling you to action. And then I'll have a slide that will say, let's answer a question right now, to remind me to run the poll, because I'm pretty classic for forgetting that I made a poll ahead of time. And so having that main deck remind me at each moment what we're doing. We're going to do a breakout now. We're going to do some independent reading now. And so I tend to have, like a 2-hour class will on average have 30 to 40 slides for me, because some of them are just images of welcome back from the breakout. Let's now debrief what you did. And so I think those are some important things for us to consider. And so that plays into the technology. What slides do I need to make to remind me to do things? And it's based on what the technology is going to allow me to do. And a sort of sub-note along that is I like for things to be pretty simple for participants. I don't like for things to be so confusing for them on just being there that I can't get to what we're trying to learn. And so I'm a big fan of platforms that have a lot of options for me, rather than these platforms that are expecting me to use additional apps that are outside of the program. And not that I don't love those apps, but it's too hard. You're already logging in, trying to get off of mute and be on your camera. And now you have to have 3 other logins to go use a special whiteboard over here and a discussion board over here and a thing over there. It's too hard. And so I really like for things to be clear and simple, so that I can focus on why we're here rather than the how of here.
I think that's a fantastic part, because I also love, to be honest, I love experimenting with Miro and other collaboration tools that I used to create, for example, for very big events. For example, I create sort of the event infrastructure there. But I also believe, and that's exactly what you're saying, the point is we don't want to impress by technology, but it's rather focusing on the why we are here, what we want to learn, but not necessarily only the how, even though Miro can be fantastic. And probably with the whole Zoomtopia integration, I think it will be all much easier in one place, which will be lovely. But I believe
I agree with you.
simplicity is the point.
Yeah, it's like I'm glad that Miro is wonderful, and I'm excited that that they're partnering, because maybe we can then take the functionality that Zoom has, which is very basic, I think they're planning that, right? I don't know how it's going to look just yet, but they're planning
Exactly.
that integration. And so now we'll have a more robust situation that doesn't require us to send a separate link and have a separate login, whether it's free or not. I need people to stay with me because they're already lost and confused. They are. And when I'm training people to be virtual trainers, a big part of what I'm focusing on is how you help participants be clear and comfortable so they can learn. And that's about creating a space that makes some sense in a world that is quite confusing for people because it's not physically defined for us.
Absolutely. And we have another comment here. So I think it's good to reduce to one platform plus 2 to 3 max external tools. I think it really depends on how big the event is, how your audience is, also how tech savvy they are. Sometimes it's even really no problem to have 2 more external tools, but also you need to be prepared to manage them properly. And we have another comment here as well. So very simple tools like Scramble does very well too. Thank you very much for sharing that.
It's like, Barbara, when you came to my Q&A earlier in the week, we use Zoom. I had just 100 people that were invited to come, and we were going to take questions just for an hour, open questions. And so I wanted a way to be able to manage that visually that would be bigger than what the Zoom chat had. And then I didn't want to miss anything. If I just had used the Zoom chat, I might have missed some things that were going through. And I didn't want to use the webinar product because I wanted people to be able to talk and be on camera. So don't go there, people. But I was using the meeting platform on purpose. And so then I thought, well, what can I do? And a friend of mine who also ended up being the producer of the session introduced me to Pigeonhole. And Pigeonhole, what a funny name. It's just a way to manage questions. And I was able to share my screen to the questions, and she was in the role of producer, moderating them and filtering them to me. When I clicked on them, they went big for you. And so that's an example of where using an external tool was very helpful. It was a large webinar style session that was more open than other webinars because I had all the questions coming through. But using that external tool was very easy for people because they could just actually do it on their phones or even a separate browser if they wanted to. Now, but if I was doing a training though, and for me, training is always smaller groups of people because I'm doing application level and higher, skills-based learning objectives, I don't have 100 people there. That's a presentation. So for me, if I'm teaching you how to do something that I'm required to assess your level of ability to do, smaller groups, there's no need for me to have you log into something else to send me a question. There's only 16 people here. I can take your questions in the chat, and I should. Let's keep it together. Why send you elsewhere?
Absolutely, totally agree. For those of you who are not familiar, because it was also my first time seeing Pigeonhole, I believe it's very similar to Slido, where you have the Q&A section where you can upvote the questions. So I usually use Slido, but I will experiment with Pigeonhole now as a new tool.
There's so many, there's so many wonderful ones, and I think it just depends on what you learn and what you get.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let me pick up here on one question that we got, Kassy. So a part of Adobe Connect, is there any other builder platform that you're working with or that you experimented?
Yeah, there are. Another example of a builder would be like Blackboard. Centra was another one, and also a company called Jigsaw. So those are just 3 that are coming up to the top of my head right now. But any platform where you can log in right now and upload all your stuff and have it be ready to go.
I just think about one platform that was also Kavon Cheung was with me here on the LinkedIn live show, I think in July. He's the founder of Toasty, and Toasty is a platform where I don't think you can upload the material beforehand, but you can build the whole sequences of interactions, what you're doing, like the breakout rooms, then the questions and icebreaker, and you build one activity after the other already in the tool. So I'm going to share that also with you later on. It's Toasty, Toasty.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a nice one, and they just got a CEO, so they're going big. They have a lot of interaction features, and you know what's interesting, Cassie? They work with they were highly engaged or working with liberating structures with Henry Lipmanowitz, talking
Mm.
about what kind of facilitation techniques would you need to make meetings or workshops meaningful, and so they were trying to develop the program, the project, their product around it.
I see. I mean, the thing about builders is wonderful that you can put everything up there and it probably alleviates any kind of stress a person might have in terms of showing something in the moment. But it does come with a series of problems. When you've preloaded everything, what do you do when you need to change something? It's pretty, then there's this whole process for now taking it down and re-putting it up there. And then there's also just the difficulty of what if it wasn't the right way that you wanted to run it, or what if it didn't just so there's restriction. When you build something, you're now restricted to what you've already put in there, and you have to go through a bigger process of changing it. And so then when you look at the revealers, you have so much freedom. People feel bound in a builder activity or a builder platform, and they feel free and creative in a revealer. So
Mm.
that's the positive way of looking at that. So each of the types have their pros and cons. You
Mm,
know,
mm.
yeah.
Yeah, I think probably it really also depends a lot on the type of workshop that you're running, the type of trainer you are, and yeah, a lot of factors that influence here. But I think the point is to understand the differences. Also, for me, it's like, okay, that's a different way of looking at it.
It determines how you design the program. It determines then how you prepare the people who are delivering it, including yourself. I think you have to
Absolutely.
start there at a baseline. And so this is a new concept that I introduced in my book that is a guideline that I've been working by for 2 decades. It's something that came out of being a technical trainer and understanding how I'm going to approach something. And so it it's new for me to officially define it like this and put it out there in the world. And I'm hoping that it helps people understand, as you've just mentioned. I see. Now I can be more strategic in my own approach to how I design and then ultimately deliver my virtual training.
Absolutely. Oh, Cassie, I forgot to ask you one fundamental question about producing. So you said at the beginning that you usually had this producer sort of emergency support at the company that you worked for. How do you deal with it now? So, for example, do you
Oh,
always have a producer? Do you sometimes have a producer? When do you have a producer?
yeah. So for me, I know I do work for myself, though I have a team of people around the world that I could reach out to, and I know people. A couple of friends of mine have built businesses around supporting virtual training. They have producer businesses, which is super cool. So for me, I have people that I have trained and worked with in the past that I will reach out to just because I know a network of people who do that. And then secondarily, if none of them are available, I go to my friends' companies where I can, request a producer to work with me. So I do work with a producer when I deliver my programming to help me do many aspects and to be the best that I can be so I can focus on the coaching and the learning and the personal touch that I like to provide.
Mm. Thanks so much for that. So also for those out there who are looking for a production company, as a side note, though you might know that also Virtual Space Hero, we produce small scale to large scale events. If you go to our webpage, we consult on design, as Kassy does as well. We consult on design, we train trainers and we coach them as well, but we also do the production part with a team of people from across the globe. So those who are interested there. Kassy, I want to pick up on another question that you also had in the brief description that I was already able to read about your book. So it was about preparation of our participants.
Oh,
So
yes.
how can we prepare attendees to participate before, during, and after the session, maybe? What would you do there as a trainer, but also what's the role of the producer in this case?
I love this prepare participants to participate via your producer. It's a lot of P's. It's the most important piece. I mean, really, gosh, the whole reason that we train is because of our participants. And so if they are not prepared to be in the environment, every beautiful thing that you've planned for them isn't going to work. It's like if I ask you to go into a breakout and open up the file that I sent to you and work on it and take notes and be ready to come back and unmute and be on camera and debrief what you did. If you don't know how to connect, download your file, use the breakout room, if you don't know how to do any of that, it's not going to work. And so it's very important that we prepare the participants to participate. And the best way to do that, I know all of you are like, I'm going to send them a document. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, they're not going to read it. I'm going to send them a video. Okay, they're going to watch it, but they won't learn it. In the 20 years that I've been doing this, I'm sorry to tell you that reading and watching are not the way that people learn how to be here. Guess what? The way they learn how to be here is to be here. And so be here and use it. People use things and do things in the moment of need. Training in the moment of need. And so what I do is, yes, I have a quick handout. Yes, I have a video. I hope that that will provide some introductory information. But I run a, kickoff to the learning experience event for all of my programs. It's live. We run introductions. They use the chat. They use the breakouts. They use the webcam. They use everything that I plan for them to use in the moment. And we do it through introductions and, program logistics and expectations. And sometimes I only do it for a half an hour, but I call it the kickoff. And people come to that and we set the stage for how we shall communicate when we learn. And the producer helps lead on that. The producer helps lead sending the communications that we're doing it. And then once we go live, the producer helps to run that with me as well. So it's a combination effort. And I think, Barbara, specific to your question, it's probably more of a production task than it is a producer responsibility. Because I personally think it's still the trainer's responsibility, because this is you establishing how you're going to communicate and how they will learn while they're with you. And so I take it on as part of my thing to do so that I can establish that relationship right from the get-go.
So could you give us one small example? Give us one small example to understand it really what you mean with that. What would be such an activity at the beginning that you have them experience it, right? Because we're talking about experiencing participation. What would that be, for example?
So the kickoff will be a half an hour. So let's say I'm going to do my Train the Trainer program, which is 5 2-hour sessions that go once a week. So we're going to be together for 5 weeks when I'm teaching you to be a trainer. And at the end of it, you're doing teachbacks and I'm coaching you. So the kickoff is a half an hour of everyone logging into the Zoom, the Adobe, the WebEx, whatever we're using. And as soon as they log in, they come off mute. They're on camera and we're talking. They're answering a question in the chat. Where are you located? Where do you wish you were located? They are drawing on the screen. What are you expected to learn? What do you want to learn? What's the main thing? Or what's challenging about being a virtual trainer? Whatever question you have that's related to what you're teaching, I'm having them draw on the screen, use the chat, be on webcam, come off of mute. And then I also usually run a poll in that session too, where they just see what it's like to answer a question in a poll, which literally everybody knows how to do. But I show them that we'll be using them. And then by the end of that half an hour, which goes by very fast, I put them into a breakout to just discuss with someone else what they learned and what stands out for them, whatever I want to do. And they've experienced now being in a breakout and coming back, and we play music and we have fun and we realize, oh, we can do all sorts of things in here and I can use all of these tools. And so I'm immediately making myself available to them to meet me, to meet each other, to see how we're going to use this environment to be together for the program that is ahead of us.
And what I really liked about that is also the first time when we talked about interactive online trainings, we talked about the annotation tool. And I'm always puzzled how many trainers, for example, don't use the annotation tool at all.
It's the best tool. It's the best one. I know.
And I think similar to what you were saying, for example, what I also love to use is additionally the green check or the red cross, right? Because that's also a voting thing that you can
nonverbal. It's called the nonverbal feedback. I love that. And when there are platforms that don't have nonverbal feedback options, I'm so sad. And in fact, I love that so much that it's part of regular language for me now. Green check if you can't wait to get started. We're like, what is she
Absolutely.
talking about? Raise your hand if, green check.
Yeah.
Put up the clock if you need to step away for a moment. This language I don't use in person, and I find myself sometimes using it in person, which is funny.
But I think also just to encourage all of you out there, I think what Kassy was saying, particularly about using these first 20, 30, whatever minutes it is to experience the platform, and then at the end sort of to reflect on it, because then we really close the learning cycle, right? If we follow Kolb, we experience the features, then we go into breakout rooms, we somehow reflect on it or on whatever we're going to do, and then we have like a really full, wholesome start. And it's fun because we have here somebody saying, sorry, Kassy, we have somebody saying, a great idea about the kickoff, Kassy. So what about if it's just a short training of 1 to 2 days and participants have no time for a little kickoff? What would you be telling them?
Well, there's no time for it to not work. So this idea of no time is unacceptable. But to your point, I don't run a full kickoff if I'm only going to be doing a webinar or if I'm only going to do a one-session workshop. So for example, right now, in an hour, I'm going to go work with a client. We're just doing one 90-minute workshop. I did not do a half-an-hour kickoff with them. What I'm going to do instead is the first 10 minutes of the program as I'm doing introductions, I'm going to run through using the tools. And we're going to use them in the moment within context of what I'm teaching. So I teach people what they need in that moment. But I will tell you that before I'm even going live, as I'm working with the client and setting up our training, I already know that this group of people that I'm working with in the next hour has been using Zoom, in this case, since March. I know they already know how to connect, and I know that at a basic level, they know how to make it work. I confirmed that beforehand, because what I don't want is to go live in an hour and have my 90 minutes planned of what I'm teaching, and you can't make Zoom work, because then you're not there. So I've already confirmed that long ahead that they can make it work. And then from there, I can run introductory activities using chat, using polling, using whiteboard tools, etc. Yeah. So it's a good point. Thank you for that question.
Thanks a lot for the question. Yeah, and as Amelie is saying, yes, simple idea, but so effective. I would also add, as Kassy was saying, when I have smaller sessions that are only like an hour, I personally, for example, rather stick to the chat tool, because I know the chat, everybody manages the chat. But for example, annotation tool, my experience, at least with the attendees, the participants that I have, very often they are struggling with the annotation tool because very few trainers are using it yet. And
I teach it anyway.
Non-verbal.
I use it anyway, Barbara, but I'm trying to pay it forward for you so that they will know how when they get there. But I do it simple, and I make it so you don't have to. Like one word that describes you today, type it on the slide. And then if they can't find it, it doesn't really matter, or circle a thing. And what ends up happening is they explore and they engage and they figure it out. And if they don't, that's okay. But I'm trying to pay it forward for you when they come.
I do know, dear people out there, I know if there are participants coming from Kassy's training, I do use everything without any exception there.
I do have a belief, Barbara, that we hold the bar too low, that we trainers are controlling people and we don't allow for mistakes as much as we should. I think we should. I'm a big like a person who practices holding the bar very high, and I think you're going to live up to it. And most of the time, people do live up to it, and it's amazing. And if you don't, whatever, you can reach out and find out, and I'm happy to help. It's okay.
It's a good point. So next time I'm going to use the annotation tool and just tell them again, okay, if you don't find it, just do it in the chat. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's fine. It's fun.
So we have here one comment. Yes, and that's also an important question or comment for the producers out there. Annotation tool doesn't work for those who don't use the Zoom client, but they sign in from the browser.
Right. So what's your note there? Don't sign in from the browser. If you want to be able to do all things, then make sure they have what they need to do all things. So when people join my sessions and they don't have the full download, then I just say, you're right, you won't be able to do that. That's on you.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a very, because of the world that I'm in, I'm teaching people how to use these tools. And so if you don't have the tools, then the answer is you're right, you don't have that tool. So we'll move on to the next thing for the rest of us to use. Yeah, I'm very
Was
clear
it?
when I'm teaching, download everything. And
Yeah.
if I'm working with a client that says we can't download it, then I work with them to change why, and we make it work. Mhm.
And I think it's also something that is part of the preparation for the training, that you prepare, and as a producer or trainer, let your participants know that they need to
Yes.
download it
It's
in
like
case
stop being in a
before.
place where you're not taking care of what people need. Because that's why
Exactly.
trainers are getting blamed for not being good at this. It's like I'm
Mm-mm.
going to teach everyone how to do ice skating, but then I forgot to tell everyone that they have to have their own skates. Well, now I just
Mm-mm.
failed as a trainer, right? But you're the one who didn't bring skates. I assumed you knew to bring skates, but maybe you didn't know that you were actually going to do it. And so it's on me to be clear to make sure you have what you need and that you can get what you need.
I was about mentioning the ice skate example because that's what Nanette and you brought up the last day. So why would you go to an ice skate lesson if you can't bring the ice skates, right? So, and
Right.
that's very similar. Still,
And so
we do
see that
know also
point
that.
too, Barbara, that just came in the chat. Organizations don't allow them to. Well, that's when I work with the organization to help the organization understand what are your goals for your people. And if you're not allowing them to have the tools that they need, then they cannot meet the goals. So that's where I start to have conversations that are at more of a strategic and leadership level, and then go from there. Then
Mm.
we adjust the goals and the expectations if they won't let them use it.
I must also say, if organizations don't allow them to do, usually I'm using another tool that the organization allows them to use. Because
Right.
for me, I have never had at least an organization that asks me to use Zoom, but only the browser-based version. They ask me to use WebEx then.
Right.
Usually, that is what I am experiencing at least.
That's right. It's so important up front to know, just as you've done, who you're working with, what do we have available. And it almost goes back to your first question. In order to be successful producing virtual training, you need to know what tool you're using and what you have available to you. Because I don't want to be
Absolutely.
live in the moment and you don't have what you need and I didn't know you weren't going to have it. I should know
Mm-hmm.
long ahead of time
Yeah,
what I'm even asking you
absolutely.
to do and make sure that you have everything you need. Mhm.
And just the last comment here from the production, but last time I was the producer for a colleague of mine who was doing a strategic workshop with a company. And imagine what happened. I never had that before either. We were using WebEx meeting, and my colleague was checking with them that everything works, the chat and blah, blah, blah. At the end, it was interesting because apparently the organization's members had two ways to enter the meeting, or through their SharePoint application or their SharePoint environment, or through the calendar invite. Those who went through one or the other couldn't use the chat. So I never had that, and also in this case, it was a
Very
disaster. And
specific.
we and we,
Yeah.
we, we figured that out like 2 minutes after it, or 2 minutes before the training, something like that. So a
Yeah,
lot
that's
of
very
change.
interesting. I mean, that's so specific and that's yeah, there's a lot of planning. You guys, like what happened with virtual training is we got to log in and we went live and we forgot to do all the planning that we normally do with all training. Like
Mm-mm.
those are some things, and that's such an unusual one. I've never heard of that either, Barbara. It's poor folks.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, well, always there are new things out there.
Always. And that's when your skills of flexibility and adaptability take over, right? And you do your best.
Yeah,
It's like a power outage.
reducing all the chat messages that I had prepared with the long links to Cutly, shortened links so that everybody can read it on a slide, right?
Oh
And
my
that in
gosh.
2.5 minutes.
Not using any of those.
Good
That's
point. Good point. There we are.
wow.
Kassy, we are almost at the end, but I'm going to extend for 1.5 minutes because there is one last question that I'd love you to ask, and that also somehow was delivered to me by one of my virtual space here members. So, how can we build successful virtual working relationship with presenters? If you are the
Mm.
producer, what's important to consider in a relationship with your presenter?
Trust. And then technically have rehearsals. Make sure you're having rehearsals and build trust. I think the relationship is the biggest thing because when you're live in the moment, you have to trust one another and know that you have each other's best interests at heart and in mind so that you can, in the moment, be able to take instruction and work together quickly without offending one another. And so for me, the best relationships with producers that I have been with people that I have built relationships with and had, personal conversations with, get to know who they are, their family. This is all the Dale Carnegie world that I live in and used to live in. Know about where they live, where they're from, what they love, what are their hobbies, their families, and know each other. Because then when it's time for my producer to tell me to stop talking, I'm not offended because I know that he cares for me and we're good friends and he means it because we're running out of time, So the trust part, and then make sure that you're having rehearsals so that you're walking through and you're both clear on who's doing what and when.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kassy. And it was, as always, it's a blast having you on my show. With that, also to all of you out there, don't miss to connect with Kassy. First of all, those who have not done yet, it's the moment now. Go to her webpage, look at the virtual training hero hits. Tips, tips, whatever.
Same thing. Yeah.
Also follow Kassy because she's posting. I saw that you started like a month ago with virtual producer trips, right?
I have been doing those as well. They're coming.
So they're coming. Her book is coming out, and all these relevant links that we talked about, we're going to share them with you in the whole communications thread later on. And maybe we are closing with the PPP, prepare participants to participate, right? I really love that.
Yeah.
Kassy, it was so great to have you on the show. Thank you very much again. You know that I have sort of a virtual cocktail prepared backstage where I'm going to join you in a minute if you have that time for me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for having me today. And thank you to everybody who spent some time being here, listening in, and for all your comments.
Thank you very much, Kassy. I'm joining you immediately. Don't drink all of the virtual cocktail yourself.
Okay.
See you in a bit. So thank you so much for your active questions, your comments. It was really a great session. So also just as an outlook, we talked today about mastering the technology to produce virtual events. And next week on Thursday, so we have another date because on Friday, I'm super busy. On Friday, we are as Virtual Space Hero producing the Global Virtual Conference for 600 students. And this event is happening on the 27th of November. I'm going to post also the link into the chat later on because we are opening up the whole conference for the public this year. And Global Case Study Challenge is one of my award-winning COIL, Cooperative Online International Learning teaching projects this year with a tremendous amount of 600 students, 22 universities from India to Chile, working in global virtual teams together. So next Thursday, the 20th of November, there is the next Virtual Space Hero LinkedIn Live with the whole Global Case Study Challenge team here with Asna Sveta and with Anna Dinenko connecting from Austria, Slovenia, and Spain. So join us because we're going to talk about the production, the insights, and also the funniest moments that we had in the past 2 months of working together with 600 students from across the globe. So thank you very much for being with us. Stay updated. We have a lot of LinkedIn Lives planned for this year. You can find them all on the virtualspacehero.com webpage. Also for next year, the lineup is spectacular. And with that, I'm leaving you into a beautiful Friday afternoon. Thanks a lot for joining, or maybe Friday morning, wherever you're connecting from, or Friday night, right? Thanks a lot for joining us and stay tuned. See you soon. Bye.